Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Information Week webinar, How to Cut the Time, Cost, and Complexity of Technology Innovation, sponsored by HCL Software and broadcast by Informatech Target. I'm Michael Krieger with Information Week. I'll be your moderator for our discussion today. And if, like me, you're fascinated by the real-world process of technology innovation and want to know more about how companies worldwide navigate the technology product lifecycle and drive digital transformation, taking tech projects from ideation to design and from prototype to production, well, you're in the right place because that's what we're going to talk about today. And on that note, I'm excited to introduce our speakers today. I am joined by Steve Rush, Senior Vice President, Head of the Americas at HCL Software, and Peter Robinson, Vice President, IT at Avnet. Thank you both for coming on today.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Terrific. So before we get started, I just want to remind our audience of a couple of things. First of all, this webinar is interactive. At the bottom of your screen, there are buttons you can click to learn about our speakers, download resources, share the webinar via social media outlets, and participate in the Q&A session that'll take place at the end of our presentation. You can also use the Q&A area to let us know if you're experiencing any technical issues, and our team will do our best to assist you. So, okay, let's get into it. Peter, tell us a little bit about Avnet and its approach to product innovation.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Avnet's over 100 years old, and Avnet's a electronic components distributor with global reach. As Michael mentioned earlier, I work in IT at Avnet. And our approach to product innovation is one, with a company as old as Avnet, we do have a lot of IT platforms inside that run our business, things like ERP, warehouse management, et cetera. And part of my role is also focused on digital platforms. And I think the real challenge here for the digital platform space is how do you innovate without having to spend, huge amounts of money and dollars? And how do you look at that innovation that benefits your business, but deploy once for multiple uses? So what I mean by that is we've been very focused on how do we innovate from a platform perspective, and how do we enable all the different parts of our business to take benefits and value from those platforms versus having to have multiple implementations of different systems. So that's been a huge focus for us of again building out these capabilities that enable reusability, composable architecture, allowing us to innovate at pace to keep up with our customers that are everyone's craving digital innovation, whether it's on the website or AI. But that's kind of the key focus, I would say.
Okay, thanks for that. So Steve, tell us about what HCL Software does and the role of innovation in your technology product lifecycle.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. HCL Software is a little bit older than 5 years, so not quite as old as Avnet. So they've got us a little bit there. But innovation is the core of everything we do. In our software and data, innovation is basically the core fundamental purpose of what we do as a business. And as you look at the current market, right, it's very uncertain times, right? You've got an economy that's in a very uncertain space. You've got an evolving technology landscape that's changing constantly and going faster than it's ever have. AI is playing a huge role. And it's a big talk track that everybody's talking about, and more changes are just coming. In this world, and as we look at it, innovation plays such a core fundamental aspect in what HCL Software does, because we're really focused on achieving better outcomes for our clients today. So as we are looking at the software products we have and the solutions we have and what we're bringing to market, we have a full suite of these products that we're innovating constantly. So we've got experience solutions, like some of which we'll talk about today, and Peter already mentioned in the total experience type space. We've got commerce, we've got MarTech, we've got data intelligence solutions, like a CDP solution and Actian data solutions. We got intelligent operations and cybersecurity solutions. All of these solutions we are constantly innovating, infusing with AI, infusing with new innovation on a daily basis to drive better outcomes for employees. Because as we look at this marketplace that's changing so fast, and it is a really unique time, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit of how we've helped Avnet in this space, really what we want clients to be focused on is how do I achieve better outcomes? and how do I use this technology and these solutions to get these outcomes? Because I think that's really fundamental, that companies and organizations are really starting to think about outcome-driven solutions much more than what piece of technology should I buy.
Let's talk about why we're here today. Tell me about this partnership between Avnet and HCLSoftware, and what your different roles are and how you collaborate.
Yeah, I'll go first. I lead our global digital platforms. So from my side, we've focused on, again, as I was mentioning earlier, how do we sort of roll out those platforms? How do we enable all of our different business units to build on top of those platforms? And the big part of this was, I think the important part there is the partnership piece, right? As we go to market with it, support our customers, partnership's a big thing we focus on. And it's around, what is the outcome that the partner's looking for? And I think the same thing here with HCLSoftware. We had a lot of discussion around what are the outcomes we wanted to achieve versus the software, and how do we lay out kind of a roadmap to get there. And again, if I keep thinking back, the really key things for me here was, how do you navigate when you're in an on-premise legacy environment where you want to migrate to cloud, and how do you do that in a quick way without having to have multiple steps along the way, and not having a whole bunch of redundancy, and not have your costs go up, right? I think everyone's, it's a real world scenario that you can't take something that you were doing on premise, move it to something new in the cloud, and spend 3 or 4 times what you spend today. So I think that partnership of how do you evolve that relationship, how do you look for the value, and the value is more than just what you pay for it. It's how fast can you innovate? How quickly can you migrate and get value for your customers? Again, how quickly can you roll out new solutions? And how do you find that value that you may not realize is available in the software package? And I think that's a big part of the partnership. Again, that focus on how do you get to an outcome versus to a sale. And I think that's the really important part of that partnership.
Yeah, I think that's right, Peter. And I think everything you've said there about partnership is directly head on. And this is not something where, hey, we got together and in a weekend figured out how to do this. This was years in the making. And this was and on the HCL side and on the Avnet side, this was a big investment. It was investment of our time and energy to put the resources forward to say, hey, let's work together. Let's develop something together, right? We've got some really good software. You're using some of our software. We can help you figure out how to get to the cloud. We can help you figure out how to get to a cost situation which is advantageous for everyone. But at the same time, what it really does is it means we sit down with our really smart solution experts, Peter and his team, and other members of the Avnet and Farnell team sit down. They work almost for a year, figuring out how to develop a solution that's going to deliver really strong outcomes for the entire organization, and is going to be a win-win. So, and then how do we implement those? And then how do we build a business case around those? And then how do we ensure that those outcomes are going to be proven out? And then what is the roadmap from there? Because it's not just you accomplish this one feat. Innovations is a constant thing. It has to be built into everything you do. It's got to be built into your DNA. And I think the team we have on the Avnet and the HCL side, innovation is built into their DNA. And they're working it every single day, thinking about it. How do I get better? Where do we take this now? And we already have a roadmap of a whole list of things that once we finish this project and we get to where we're going to get to, we know where we're going to go from there. And it was so powerful. It's at our highest level where our CEO talks about it. Peter's CEO talks about it. It's a very powerful evolution of how we can take technology and really utilize it to drive some strong, powerful outcomes for Avnet and HCLSoftware.
So, Peter, let me be very direct and ask you, why HCLSoftware? Why did you select them as a partner?
So we're an existing customer of HCLSoftware, but we were again, we've got 2 big parts of our business, what we call our Avnet Core and our Farnell business. And on the Avnet Core side, we were at a crossroads of what was next for where we wanted to go in this space. And we did look at, multiple options, including going to open source, looking at other software partners out there. But the interesting part with HCL was, as I mentioned before, it was hey, let's have a conversation about what you want to achieve. Let's put that aside and just, how do we help you move forward and even help you with the pros and cons on the different choices in front of you. And it's interesting because you could almost say in some ways it felt almost like you're working with a consulting company that was just, how do I get to this outcome? And I think that really resonated with us. And then on top of that, you look at all the innovation that HCL has on the roadmap, right? They allowed us to go from a legacy on-premise and jump to a completely cloud-native solution. And even that approach, and that had a huge amount of innovation with it, because you could have taken the other approach, that's the safe approach, that says, let's just upgrade on-premise first, and then let's go through this iterative process that would have taken us, multiple years longer than we wanted. And it was, let's do an entire leapfrog and partner with you, bring you on that product journey, explain where the product's going from a product roadmap, and help us, realize this vision of, what we call that. And from our side, we actually refer to it as a digital enablement platform. How do we enable all of our business units? And HCL, hey, we're happy to support this goal of a digital enablement platform and show you how our software can fit into it. So the partnership, it's interesting. Our business sometimes doesn't even know the software that we've actually bought. They know it as this digital enablement platform, which encompasses data and APIM and cloud native and everything that comes with it. So I think the fact that HCL helped us drive this overall vision is one of the key reasons for me why HCL is such a important partner. And as Steve said, during that year-long process, I mean, the HCL team was available anytime we wanted to talk, even for areas where maybe they're not the exact experts or maybe it's not their space. They were still happy to have a conversation and bring people with all the different varied backgrounds that HCL has to have conversations on different topics. So that for us really embodies that partnership, and that's why we chose them to continue our journey.
So, I mean, I think of Avnet as, a well-established large company. Why did you choose to use a partner at all instead of doing this internally?
So I think the important part there is when you look at the future roadmap, right, where things are headed. So Avnet's, as you mentioned, we're a large global company. We do have a lot of capabilities ourselves, but when you go out to the web and the digital experience space, you look at some of the things that HCL has and what they have on their roadmap. I think it would be very hard for us to do that on our own. And again, Steve touched before on, you have AI, you have all these things coming to play in the future, and things around personalization, cookie consent, all of those changes that are coming for us. Let's not even think about AI, right? That's going to disrupt this entire thing. You want to be with a partner that's building out for the future, and I think that's an important change as HCLSoftware acquired those assets and actually worked to take them forward. Those were the things that have made us look and say, this is the path we want to go down.
Yeah, and I think, Michael, it's not enough just to have great software today. I think where Peter touched on the consulting aspect, I think where we see companies choosing to work with HCLSoftware rather than build themselves is everything that Peter said, plus all of the additional resources we bring to the table from a consulting standpoint, from a solution standpoint. We were able to augment Peter's team with additional resources that they did not have to go to market, pay for, outside expertise. We were bringing expertise from what other companies were doing. What were their competitors doing? What were other people in the industry? What were other industries doing? And we were able to bring all this knowledge and expertise to the table to include and help them think through different options and different solutions. And then we were very transparent about what the options are, because we always know there are competitors, and we always know that building something themselves is always an option. So we try to bring our best thinking and be very transparent about how we can help them build a solution that's going to work for them, because it's got to be a win-win, and it's got to be something that's really outcome based, that they can look at and say, yes, over the next 10 years, if I partner with HCLSoftware, I'm going to continue to see innovation. I'm going to continue to be able to make that path down that roadmap that they're headed.
And of course, this lets Avnet focus on their business rather than worrying about the transformation that's going to get them to where they want to go. And let me remind everyone in attendance, you can submit your questions at any time. We'll get to as many of them as we can after we're done with our discussion. So Peter, what's the value that the partnership has created for you and for Avnet?
This is an interesting question, especially you say for me, and I'd say for me and my team, it's actually changed, how we're perceived by the leadership team, right? We're seen as an innovation team that took, again, I'd say a legacy thing that was, just a website to an enablement platform, and then asking that question of where can we go and what digital interactions do customers want in the future? So again, we have two parts to our business, right? Where we have a catalog distributor in Farnell and what we would call our core distribution business. A customer may not want to do all of their business online in commerce, but they may want to do self-service. They want advanced analytics for their supply chain. So we need a digital experience platform that can offer those things up. But at the same time, there's this huge rise of business IT, right? So you end up with all these different people want to build stuff and make that digitally available to customers. So what this kind of did for me and for my team is it pivoted us from we're the only team that can build stuff that goes out onto the website to we provide a platform. We provide this capability for all the different stakeholders in the company to come towards. So it kind of reinvents us as an IT team from an application team to we're now a platform team, right? We're offering this capability and we're sort of future-proofing what those capabilities are by allowing them to be built out by all the different people across the organization. And for the other part, for Avnet as an organization, it brings us this capability of being able to have unique go-to-market strategies, right? So if you think about a website, a PDP page is going to be global. It's probably going to look the same, but what you want from a self-service or a supply chain capabilities probably going to be different in China, from Europe, to the Americas. So being able to cater to all those different things are what's really important for our organization, because we do have global reach, but we do have a local presence, and it's important that our go-to-market strategy in those regions is aligned with what's important in that region.
You mentioned, the different stakeholders who are taking advantage of what you've created. Who are some of they, and what are some of the benefits that they've seen?
So in our different business units, as I mentioned, they have different go-to-market strategies. So on our site, there's capabilities around people being able to come to the site, build out electronic block diagrams, self-service orders. So some of the benefit you get is our internal people can tell customers, hey, you can check your order status, you can check your details of all of your orders online. So that benefits those internal people. With the revamp of our platform, we rebuilt our analytics engine. So we have way more visibility to what customers are doing on our side and how do we offer up personalized service for them. And then the big part is down the road, this capability to be able to put a CDP across the entire enterprise. So this shift to cloud, enables us to do a lot more from that perspective. So we're able to have, an instance in each part of the world. We're able to call real-time data from our ERPs and pull that up. So from a stakeholder perspective, you don't end up with differences between data on the website being a couple hours old. Now it's real-time data coming up through there. And then I'm trying to think through the other probably really big piece is just that go-to-market strategy. We have a digital leader in different parts of the business, or digital leaders in different parts of the business. For them to be able to have unique go-to-market strategy is very important for them. And that's a super important capability, as well as I'd say the personalization for customers is the other big part that we're going to see benefit down the road.
Yeah, I think, Peter, that's right. And I think, having worked with you guys, the past year, I think that power of one that you focus on in terms of that global reach and having everybody have access to that same technology and same ability to do all of those things, but also have the unique flexibility in the regions that they need to, is really what helped create a really powerful solution. And when we architected this, looking at how to do that was really important. And I think that, gave a lot of the stakeholders around the world a lot of comfort to say, yes, I can adopt this, but also do what I need to do. And I found, dealing with all of your different stakeholders, that really resonated with them.
Yeah, Power of One's an important initiative, and you can hear our CEO even mention it on the calls that he's on. And how do you bring together the synergies, or I shouldn't say the synergies, the different go-to-market strategies, but bring them under one umbrella from a digital perspective is one of the I'd say key outcomes that we're getting from this relationship and where we're moving forward, or how we're moving forward.
So let me switch gears and ask, tell me a little bit about your discovery process. How do you surface useful insights about how your clients can optimize their product lifecycle?
Yeah, electronics, especially if you look over the last few years with COVID and those types of things. So you have these, cycles that we go through where there's a lot of supply and there's not enough supply. And what we found during that entire time is, this thirst for data and information on where things are, what's happening with pricing, where's product coming from, what does the delivery and lead times look like? And there's this thirst for knowledge. Actually, it's interesting. I've been at Avnet for 30 years. And way back it was, customers had to come to you. There was no web. They needed a data book. We had all of the information. Now there's information everywhere, right? You can find it all over the place. And then you end up with this question of how do you offer, valuable information or trusted information? And how do you serve that up in a way that can help them choose, what are the right products to put in their life cycle? So if you're a design engineer designing something, if you design a product that's close to the end of its life cycle, or if it's in short supply, you can actually design something and then find out you can't source the product, which means you can't manufacture and you can't ship. So we essentially have to transfer or change how we've done everything over the years to now make everything available digitally, as well as make it, that same information for our employees, right? We don't want someone to see something via a website and that be different from what we see internally. So having, that exact same thing via a digital channel or an analog channel, you want to have the exact same data available. And I think that's super important for our customers. I think, again, the supply chain data, what's available, what's in short supply, that's amazingly important. You spend, 6 to 9 months a year building out a hardware design to not have product available to actually manufacture is a really big problem. The other part of this is, how do you help them buy the really small quantities at the start of that journey to build their, proof of concept, their pilot products, and then how do you scale to large scale production, and how do you go across those two? Which again, Steve mentioned before, power of one. That's the power of one Avnet being able to serve you on both sides of that product lifecycle is super important. And again, I think with the HCL team, it's one of the things we've discussed a lot about is how do we even talk about this customer journey on that life cycle? How do we reimagine that in a digital world where, you don't just wake up and look at what are the orders I have, but what projects are they supporting? How do I tie it together that I need these 5 components in order to be able to make my manufacturing? So we're looking at how do we build out a digital journey that encompasses that, pulls it together.
Okay, thank you for that. Here's a question that came in from one of our attendees named Charles. He's got a 3-part question for you. He wants to know, what are the key factors affecting the time, cost, and complexity of bringing tech products to market? How are those factors evolving? And what new factors should companies keep in mind? So 3-part question for you there.
Yeah, maybe I'll go a bit first and maybe I'll comment on a couple and then pass to Steve. Number one, I think the challenge is, especially being from an IT department, finding the budget, right? The cost and the how do you find the money to go out and invest? And then I think you got the other challenge around the complexity. One of the things that we focused a lot on was we have a lot of IP in-house, and we touched on that earlier. We have a decent sized company. And we looked at what's important on the Avnet IP kind of knowledge, and then what do we get from partners, right? So how do we bring our specific knowledge, work with partners, and look at how do we bring that, I'd say new tech to what we want to go and achieve. So I think it's important in that aspect of how do you get value from new tech? You need that existing business knowledge in order to be able to value it, because just new tech for the sake of new tech doesn't get you anything. It has to be rooted in your business value and the data. So I think that's super important. I think the factors are evolving. I think that's a huge challenge in terms of going from on-premise to cloud. You really can run the risk of your cost. I have a few places where my costs jumped a lot as we moved to cloud. And I think this is an area where we talked a lot with HCL around how do we look at the entire stack? I think the important factor here is how do you look at the entire stack of everything we do, not just one piece? And how do you partner on that entire stack? Because it could be that you think one piece is moving from here to there, but if you move this other piece, then there's overall value in shifting the entire stack.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll pass to Steve what you think next.
No, I think that's right, Peter. And I think, Michael, that companies really have to understand how they think about transformation, right? Every company has to be transforming constantly, consistently, looking at how are we going to evolve, how are we going to get better, what are we going to do. And as Peter said before, you could bring great tech, and tech, just buying tech for tech isn't going to solve their problems. But they really have to look at, are they ready for transformation, and are they embracing transformation? Because there's a lot of companies out there, and they go status quo, and status quo companies aren't evolving. And part of that, when we look at how we bring tech products to market, where we're bringing them most successfully, like we did with Avnet, is where the companies are ready to embrace transformation, right? Avnet was ready to embrace the power of one. They were looking and saying, yes, where we are today is we cannot be where we are in 3 years. We have to change. We've got to transform. We've got to get better. We've got all this incredible tech, all this incredible consulting, all of this incredible knowledge, but the organization has to be ready to embrace that change. And so for us to bring it to market, we're looking for the companies that are saying, yeah, I want to have an innovative conversation. I want you to let you in the doors in my offices, talk about our business, understand our needs, understand our complexities. Let's brainstorm about what kind of technology you have today and how that could help my company. Those dialogues are what really lead to success. That's how you really bring tech to market. That's how you bring innovation to market in those conversations, right? That innovation comes in, where Peter's sitting in Phoenix there, and our teams live there. They're in there all the time. They're working in their offices. I can't tell you how many days and nights we've spent in there whiteboarding stuff. That's where the innovation comes from. That's where the results come from. That's where you drive outcome-based results. And I think that level of thinking, I would encourage every company out there to be saying to themselves, am I transforming? Am I thinking about transformation? Am I talking to technology companies the right way and having those conversations? Because if you are, you're going to be really successful. If you're not, you're going to be stuck in status quo, and that's going to lead you not to get the results you want.
Thanks, Steve. That's a great point.
I was just going to chime in. I think one other important thing is, I don't think you can innovate in everywhere at the same time. So I think it's important that you pick where it matters and focus in on that. If I look at areas, one of the things I run a pretty large SAP landscape. I know I'm not going to innovate in that space at this point in time. So I focused on the digital space. And again, we partnered with all of our different teams across the globe. We talked about getting people cloud native. We actually also even migrated people, right? So we took people that we looked at roles. This was a big win for us, actually. We looked at what are the work people are doing on mature platforms, and saying that, do I need to keep innovating in those mature platforms? I don't. And then we're able to shift heads to the innovation space, and we're able to build out an entire team focused on innovation just by moving people out of spaces where there wasn't as much innovation anymore. And that was a big win for us, and that helped us get started on this cloud journey, which ultimately came up to this point. But yeah, I think we've ended up with a global team focused on innovation now, just by pulling people that were working on legacy platforms.
Yeah, I think that roadmap is so critical, Peter. If you looked at the way that our teams worked, right? I mean, ultimately we started with boiling the ocean. What is the art of the possible? And we outlined, everything that could be done. And then we sat there and looked at it with your team and leadership and said, well, what's realistic to do now? And then how would we get there, right? And then we mapped out, right, that roadmap over the next 3 to 5 years of where you could go and how you could get the innovation you wanted to and what pieces you could add. Because to your point, you can't do everything. But that collaboration is what led, to a lot of that success in terms of building out that roadmap. And I think that collaboration was really successful. And I think it's a really important part of how companies and technology companies need to work together.
Yeah, I wanted to add one other thing that just so you said that, Steve, it reminded me of an interesting thing. We've definitely looked at what is the next, 3 to 5 year roadmap. The interesting part, though, is 3 years ago, we had that 3-year roadmap, and now we're coming to the end of that 3-year roadmap. So it's super exciting to finish a 3-year roadmap and turn around and go, now I know what I want to do over the next 3 to 5 years, and be able to chart that out. And it's funny because it feels like when you look at the next 3 to 5 years, the leaps are really huge because you've got this 3 years of foundation underneath you. And again, I can't stress enough on there's the HCL piece, but there was all the other back-end piece of microservices in the cloud, APIM, discussing on network, how do we run in the hyperscalers. All of those things come together and that they multiply as you move forward.
Right. So in what concrete ways, Peter, would you say your work has changed the way that teams interact and the way that workflows are structured?
So the teams interacting is a really big one for us. In the past, we were very much focused on, and this is probably a little bit specific to our legacy environment and a migration to a modern one. So I think like a lot of organizations, we have a complex landscape, lots of systems, lots of business units around the globe. And you end up with, from my world, I say you end up living in ETL hell, right? Where data is just being passed back and forth. And you actually spend more time talking about moving data from one place to another versus innovating, right? So now with what we've implemented here, where now, things are served up directly through DX, through APIs, through microservices. Things come directly to the browser. They're distributed all over the globe. And the building out of those capabilities is no longer just sitting with a single global team. It's spread across the globe. So you can imagine from that standpoint, we're able to move a lot faster than we were in the past because the work's completely distributed. I mean, you're getting to the stage of true agile at that point where teams can pick up different pieces of code or parts of the system and change them completely independently. We weren't able to do that before. It was a monolithic. We would start again discussions with ETL. Who has the data? Who's going to send me the data? Let's explain everything to an ETL team versus now build a microservice and we're just going to consume it. So that's super important. And then the other one I stressed on as an IT team, moving from I'm a roadblock to something somebody wants to get done or in a queue to now I have this composable architecture. If you want to make a simple change, I can enable that. People can do that their own. You want a complicated change? Now that we're, agile and completely composable, we can do 10 or 20 projects. It's just a function of, do you have enough value and can you build a business case to fund it? So that's a big change from an IT team's perspective where otherwise someone asks for something, I can look at it in 3 months' time. I can't even look at it now because of the monolithic architecture. So that for us is a huge change in how we work. And as I mentioned as an IT team before, switching from an app team who's in the way to a platform team that's enabling is enabling everyone to think different about how we move forward in this tech stack.
Yeah, and I think, Peter, what you said there about data, I think is critical for everybody in the marketplace. I mean, you look at what you guys are doing, and from a data perspective, you're taking Avnet and Farnell and all of this infrastructure around the world and all this data around the world and trying to put it in, trying to use technology to be like, how do we work with this data better to help our clients, right? And you guys are doing a tremendous job around that. But every company out there that we work with, in the way that the market is evolving, data is an incredibly key component of what they need to be thinking about, right? Whether in your healthcare, financial services, the massive data you have today, right, is an enormous challenge. And being able, the companies who are able to take advantage of the technology out there to be able to help them use that data better and get better information out of it and use it to help their clients better, use it to help it, whether it's commerce, marketing, security, do all of the things that they need to do with that data is fundamental for how they're going to be successful. And so as we are, looking at, our innovation in the marketplace, everything we're doing is around how do we help companies better with that data and then achieve outcomes. And I think as companies are thinking about it out there and, looking at what you guys did, Peter, I think, you guys are a recipe of like, how do I take that data and do something really successful with it?
And let me remind everyone, keep the questions coming. We will put aside some time for Q&A when we're done with our conversation. But before we get there, Peter, let's talk about results. How does the work that you two have done together, your two organizations, how does it translate into, better outcomes, client visibility, and cost savings?
So outcomes, our goal was to reinvent our tech stack and bring real-time data available to the customers. We've had a few go lives recently. We've still got one to do for one of our regions in August. What we're seeing is more valuable engagement from our clients, right? By us building out, and we partnered with HCL on for our core business, how do we build a self-service portal which would enable that kind of next generation self-service and enable us to bring better capabilities in that space and build out a roadmap of what we want to do. But I think that outcome of we're now seeing interactions for customers that really want to come to our site. They really want to do self-service. So it's valuable interactions versus just people coming to the site and just clicking around and looking. So again, it's a thing for us around the self-service side. And then ultimately what we see is that outcome across the entire Avnet. So, we touched on before, Power One. That's an outcome that we can see, we can touch, we can feel it. We know what it's going to look like when a customer can go from one Avnet property to another Avnet property seamlessly and have a CDP to do all the right personalization. So that's an outcome that we see now. But if you went back 3 years ago, that outcome seemed impossible, seemed to be too far away. You touched on cost savings. I think an interesting one there is, again, from an IT team's perspective, getting started on the journey is probably the hardest part. So how do you, in the beginning, our goal in the beginning was to stay cost neutral, right? It was, hey, we have a budget. How do we innovate but stay flat? That was the key thing, stay flat. And then, of course, obviously, ideally, you say, hey, I want cost savings. Cost savings is really what powers our innovation, right? So whatever we can save, we can then turn into how do we innovate further. And I think, again, through this process, as Steve, we talked about earlier, we looked at the entire stack. We didn't just look at, oh, hey, here's this one piece of software. It was what runs the entire stack? How do we get to that right outcome from a cost perspective and cost model versus look at just one individual thing? And again, with that, we had a lot of detailed conversations. As Steve said, they had teams in here. We went through all the details together around how do we get to that right outcome from cost. Steve, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Peter, I think all that is right. I think where I give you and your team incredible credit is that you guys really looked at the cost savings holistically and didn't say, oh, like, what are you going to sell it to us? How do I negotiate this? Like, what is it? You sat there and said, no, I got to look big picture at this. And our teams were able to sit down and look at your total cost structure, of Farnell and Avnet and all the pieces together, all the software, all the infrastructure, all the hyperscaler situation. We were able to look at everything, and we were able to brainstorm about how do we build a business case together. And we really built a business case together. And it led us to innovations that I don't think we would have had if we didn't do that. It led us to outcomes around some of the hyperscaler things we did that we never would have done if we hadn't been so transparent with each other in terms of, how do we both recognize a good outcome here? How do we create the maximum cost savings we can for Avnet? And how do we get to a good place? So you guys did a tremendous job with that. I think, companies who truly partner, who have those real partnership with some of their providers that are able to share a lot of that data and brainstorm and have that trust in that partner, I think they accomplished tremendous things. And I think that's where you guys came out. So I give you guys a lot of credit for that.
So, Peter, how would you say HCLSoftware has helped you catalyze change and transform your business?
So this, way back for me, the moment sinks all the way back to the original where we wanted to pitch this idea where we'd made quite a bit of progress in the innovation space, but we're at a crossroads where, it was at a point where what we were going to do with this legacy platform we had and how do we move forward. And the really big part was when we sat down with HCL, it was, this conversation of how do we pitch to the leadership, to the C-suite of the company, what we want to do. And we had a lot of discussions together around how do we frame that picture and how do we frame, that conversation. And again, it was really, truly an outcome-based conversation. I think the great thing with HCL is I never feel like there's any boundaries in terms of the conversation, right? Whether you want to talk about Adobe Analytics, they don't turn around, hey, you shouldn't use that. Let's use this product or that product. let's talk about what you want to achieve and why you want to achieve it, and how does our product integrate with it. I think that part of the partnership is what's really important. I think people need to sort of let go of those boundaries, and if you focus on what the customer wants to achieve and help the customer achieve that, I think that's how you win in the end on both sides.
So I want to leave some time for questions, but let me wrap up with this, Peter. What does the future hold for your organization? And do you see other opportunities for Avnet and HCL Software to keep working together?
Yeah, as Steve mentioned, we have a multi-year plan around what we're going to do next. We're really excited about what I think HCL has in the pipeline. We talk about some things around search. I think now, if anyone who runs a website or any of these types of digital things, you're focused on how is AI going to influence search? How am I going to serve up that kind of personalized experience? Is another really interesting one, because I think people are looking for smarter personalization, right? So I think I talked before around, is personalization, since you bought this, you may want this, or is personalization in some business, B2B world of, hey, the lead time for this product's gone from 16 to 52 weeks. I want to let you know that this is a personalized thing for you. So I think the ability to personalize like that at scale is super important. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for value between the AI and the personalization side of that journey for us at HCL.
Yeah, and I think it's about the partnership we have and being able to talk openly about our roadmap and where we're going. And like Peter said in the last question, we don't have any boundaries. The only thing that's important to us is how does Avnet achieve their outcomes, and you got to put all the other stuff aside, because at the end of the day, it's got to be a long-term partnership. We're not in this for a 1-year partnership and 2-year partnership. We're in this for a 30-year partnership. And so we're very transparent with Avnet about, this is the roadmap. These are where we're innovating. This is where we're going. How does that match up? And the feedback we get from Avnet and our other clients is critical, because that drives our innovation and our roadmap and where we go. We have a client council that the CIO of Avnet is helping to chair us in some of the spaces, just so we can gather more and more of that information, because it's really critical that we're transparent, so that we have this ability to grow together. And we do have this 3-year roadmap. And you know what? It'll probably change, because technology is changing so fast. Things are innovating. Some of the business needs at Avnet might change. That flexibility we have with them to kind of evolve and how we want to go is critical to the partnership.
And with that, gentlemen, I want to thank you both for our discussion. Really, really interesting to me personally, as well as our attendees. And now let's get on to our Q&A portion of our event. And as a reminder, to participate in the Q&A, just type your question into the text box located to the left of the presentation window, or click the Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. And if we're not able to answer all submitted questions during our webinar, we'll be sure to share them with our speakers, who can reply to you offline. So let me start with a question from Leo, who wants to know, why did Avnet want cloud offerings as opposed to a hybrid offering or on-premises, or did this just make the most sense for your needs?
It's one that comes up a lot, especially within my own team, as we think about, I think everyone's very sensitive to the cost of cloud, right? People feel the price maybe keep going up, or things keep. I think the really important thing for us was we wanted to be able to innovate at speed. And if I look at, cloud gets very, very interesting in terms of, I can have 3 instances deployed around the globe to service my different people. I can spin up environments as I need them very, very quickly. I have a ton of flexibility for deploying, my services all over the world. So, for the microservices, apart from the web platform. So those things are definitely important for us. And then on top of that, there are some capabilities in the cloud that you don't have on premise. We do have a very large, on-premise environment as well, that's more focused on our ERPs and those types of things. But we see a lot of value in doing these things in the cloud and being cloud native. Again, I think a lot of companies, Avnet's not in the IT business, or in the component distribution business. So I think it's important for us to focus on where we believe we add the most value, and to leverage partners where we think we can get the most value out of that relationship.
Yeah, and I think at HCL Software, Michael, we see what's happening in the market, and we see that a lot of companies are struggling with some of what's happening in the cloud and the costs that are constantly going up, and are they getting the value out of that? We've architected our technology in a way to be very flexible with on-prem, with cloud, working with multiple hyperscalers, to really be able to control that cost differently than we see what's happening in the marketplace. And so what we architected with Avnet was really a structure that allowed them to have more price flexibility than you would typically see in a cloud. It enabled them to get to the cloud sooner, to start taking advantage of that. And so our ability to do that, and also work with one of the hyperscalers that they did in a unique way, I think gave them some flexibility to do things that they might not have been able to do, in a normal cloud situation.
And again,
I was going to add. Sorry, I was going to add one other point. I think the other one that's super important for me is that flexibility of sizing. Over the years, I've struggled with, when I'm launching a big new ERP, how big a box do you buy at that launch, and how do you get it right? That flexibility in sizing and being able to build out additional tiers when we want to do additional dev cycles has just been amazing.
And keep the questions for Peter and Steve coming. We have time for a few more. This one from Srisha, who says, was there resistance to the massive changes this 3-year technology roadmap called for, and how is the resistance overcome? Can you talk about the importance of change management along the way?
Yeah, this is a good question, because you end up with resistance on multiple sides. So even when we first started, my first cloud native application development team started off with one person. So we'd started doing a whole bunch of stuff in the cloud, more on the infrastructure as a service side. And we started out with a PaaS development team. And we had a few teams that were doing some stuff in cloud, but no one fully dedicated. We started off with one person, and that team quickly grew to, about a dozen people focused on cloud native. And there's still a little bit of resistance, but I think the big thing was, once the IT teams could see how fast they could move and the advantages of the cloud, that won them over. From a business perspective, this wasn't a discussion, obviously not around cloud. It was around, how do we get to their outcome? So we looked at what was their biggest pain points, and how do we structure this project and this initiative around how does it address what their business challenges were. And we were very focused on those outcomes. The other one I'd say is we focused on talking to multiple levels. So this was a conversation with the C-suite, with the regional presidents of the business units, and with people within the regions. And a lot of leveraging, years of relationships and being out there and meeting and talking with those business units in person and laying out what this roadmap means to them. Definitely challenging, but in the end, the reward has been really great for everyone involved.
Yeah, and I think, Peter, what worked really well was the collaboration we had around identifying who the stakeholders were, to your point, what their business needs were, and then investing the time to travel, sit down with them in person, walk them through the solution, get their feedback, incorporate their feedback, evolve the solution as we go. So all of that investment up front, right, when we got to the point of, hey, getting the C-suite to buy in, everybody had their chance to have their say, make sure their needs were taken care of, make sure they felt bought into the solution and where Avnet was going. That, from an outsider looking into as you went through the process in those, final months, all of that had played a big benefit to everybody feeling comfortable and on board about, yes, this is what we're doing and here's how we're doing it, and I feel like I'm part of this.
And that's a great lead into the next question we have from Lloyd, Steve, which is, how do you clarify the roles that the different stakeholders will play in the product lifecycle to ensure you're getting the right inputs from the right people to make the transformation successful?
Steve, you want to go first on this one?
Sure. Yeah. I think it's important. We working with many different companies and working with, Avnet, taking the history we've had of going through these transformation with companies, really sitting down with Peter and his team and others and asking all the questions that we had to ask, like who is going to be involved, who this is going to impact, understanding the business outcomes, and then backing into, what pieces are going to be impacted by that. So we understood all the different people that would be involved, right? Understanding certainly the CFO is going to have a view. As Peter said, they wanted to get to cost neutral. That was going to be important, right? The CFO was going to have a big say around what the spend was and how the spend was structured. So working with his team to understand not only cost neutral, but it's going to be like, when are you going to spend the money? What's it going to mean from a cash flow situation? How is this going to play out over the next, 3 or 4 years? And what happens when the contract's over? What are the next steps, right? Understanding they're going to have all of those questions and identify all of that. Understanding all the different stakeholders and all their different needs. We asked a lot of questions of Peter and his team to really understand, who those people were and how we could help influence those people so that they better understood the solution. And they felt they were really engaged in a part of it, and they understood how they would get the outcome they wanted and what the impact would be for them. And then, we talked about last, the change management is really important, right? The change management has to be a big part of this, and it starts in the beginning. It starts at that part of where you're identifying the stakeholders and getting them engaged, and then continuing that conversations and following up with them, right? It's not a one-shot deal. It's continuing to go back to them and say, okay, this is the progress we're making. This is what's happening. How is this working for you? Give us that feedback so we can adjust, change. What do we need to do? How do we need to improve? And making all of those processes go as we work through not only the implementation, but then the ongoing delivery.
Yeah, I think the one thing for me that I would call everything Steve said. I think the other thing is finding an executive sponsor that can support you and help you. One of the big things for me, I report to Avnet's CIO. He, teed up several opportunities for me to present to the C-suite and regional presidents of the business unit to explain and pitch this project and this initiative that got us started. And I think you need that sponsorship at the high level to help you drive these things as well.
Absolutely. C-suite buy-in is almost essential for a project like this. We have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. This one comes from Evan, who wants to know, well, let me get this one from Srisha first, who's asking, was the Avnet IT team upskilled in the process of this technology change? What was the relationship between the HCL software project team doing all the work and the Avnet team as far as project roles and responsibilities?
So, I struggle between the word upskill and cross-skill. So some of my teams say, hey, I'm getting cross-skilled, not upskilled, because I already have this knowledge and I'm just applying it to a different platform. I would say here you have to think of it, it's really a hybrid team. There was Avnet, we'd work with one of HCL's partners and HCL to deliver this project. So there was kind of an all play in terms of that. So yes, the Avnet team was cross-skilled. But again, before that, we'd spent probably 2 years working on lots of other cloud native capabilities within the team. But that's been a big part of my mantra, was to cross-skill or upskill my team. And we do that across the board. It's something I'm super proud of and super focused on. Majority of my team have been at Avnet for over 10 years. Some of them even started from SAP ERP, and now they're cloud native doing Python and Databricks. And some people from legacy, web commerce to now building out HCL DX and cloud native. I think the grounding of technology skills you have just amplifies when you cross-skill it over to the cloud. And my best cloud people are people that have been doing it for well over a decade.
Yeah, and I think, Peter, to part of that question of how the HCL team and the Avnet teams work together, I think you said it earlier. I mean, we're available all the time for whatever you need. I mean, look at it as we're interchangeable, right? They're from a standpoint of, we're both very focused on the success of the project and getting the outcomes that Avnet needs. And we're both highly invested in it. And so the teams collaborate in an incredible way. They know each other really well. They trust each other. They work together well. The partnership is very strong in terms of if somebody at Avnet needs something or has a challenge or a challenge surfaces, we jump right in as a team, and we look at it as we're one team. It's not Avnet HCL. It's just one team trying to get the project done and accomplish the results. And I think that really speaks to the partnership. It speaks really well to your team and how well that they've embraced, working with HCL, and how well the HCL team has jumped in and, gotten to be part of the Avnet team.
Yeah,
We
I
have
think I just want
Jessica.
to say, I think
Go ahead.
trust was the key word there. I think the trust is there, and the team that's super helpful.
Just a couple of minutes left. Let's wrap off with this question from Evan, who wants to know, how do you maintain the flexibility and manage the stakeholders' timing in areas where you won't necessarily have that flexibility?
That's an interesting one. I think planning ahead, right? I think we have to lay out, here's the timeline, here's what's possible. There's always competing priorities, even for us to keep this roadmap going while tariffs is happening. So many different things come up every other day. So I think, I think for me, that probably the number one thing I'd say, and I remind my team all the time, quality is job number one, right? So again, we have timelines and we have all these other pressures on us, but quality is job number one. Don't go live if it doesn't work, if it's not right. And I think that's probably the mantra that I put into everything is quality is job number one. You'll get in trouble for being late on a project. You get in a lot more trouble if it doesn't work when you go live. So I think quality is job one, and then you work the rest out based off that.
Yeah, I think what Avnet did really well, where the collaboration worked really well, was the stepping back and being honest about what could we accomplish in what time frame, and then we built the flexibility into those timeframes of the project, right? Where we ended up in the timeframes was very different than where we started, right, Peter? In terms of when things would go live and how we would do it, because we sat back and said, what was realistic here? What could we really do? And took all the feedback we got from all the different stakeholders, and then crafted a implementation schedule and a resource schedule that we thought, yes, this will make it achievable. This will give us the best chance for success. And then, we really crafted that in a way that set us up for success. And I think that the transparency that your team had about, what was really realistic and what challenges, that they faced in the past, to your point about trying to do too much, so we took some things out of scope and we said, these are going to be second phase things, right? Because we wanted to make sure the things we did were going to be successful. And I think that collaboration there and those conversations really set us up for success and really put us in a good position to get those outcomes that we both want to get.
And that's all the time we have for questions today. I want to thank you, Steve Rush and Peter Robinson. Information Week appreciates your time and expertise on today's topic. And thanks to our sponsor, HCLSoftware, as well as to everyone in the audience. We appreciate your attention and participation in the Q&A. Within the next 24 hours, you'll receive a personalized follow-up email with details and a link to today's presentation on demand. Please feel free to share that with your colleagues and peers who are not able to join us for the live event today. This webinar is copyright 2025 by Informa Target, and the presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by InformationWeek and HCLSoftware, and the individual speakers solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our guests at HCLSoftware and the InformationWeek team, I'm Michael Krieger. Thanks for your time. Have a great rest of your day.